Some more difficult injury news for the Fighting Irish. I'm Tim Prister with Drew Mentock of Irish Illustrated, joined by John Brice of the FootballScoop and Irish Illustrated. This is our instant analysis brought to you by RV Manufactured Housing Hall of Fame in Elkhart, Indiana. Notre Dame gets some bad news. Marcus Freeman announced today that Benjamin Morrison, Notre Dame's All-American quarterback, will be lost for the balance of the season. Not a shoulder injury like he dealt with before. This is a hip injury that's going to require surgery, and really bad news. I mean, obviously a great football player. There's some silver lining stuff they'll talk about in a minute. I'm sure Benjamin Morrison isn't looking at that right now, John, but yeah, I mean, you got to go to war moving forward with half your regular season without Benjamin Morrison playing cornerback.
Yeah, consensus All-American, a guy that all the draftniks have has pretty much a consensus projected first-round draft pick. Hopefully this does not diminish his ability to achieve that goal in the future. But a really damaging loss for the Irish, a guy that had meant so much to this team and had often played his best in big moments, and we still expect this Notre Dame team to have an opportunity for big moments over the balance of the season. The plus there is Mike Mickens, as we've outlined and chronicled very well, is an elite evaluator, a very good coach there in the secondary, and they've already been bringing along those younger guys, Carson Hobbs, Leonard Moore especially, playing the 76 snaps against Louisville. This really stinks for Ben Morrison right now and for the foreseeable future. It's really bad for Notre Dame right now. It's a long-term blessing for the Irish in the secondary because it's more forced action for those guys, and it will make them better the rest of this year, and it'll especially make that secondary better moving towards 25.
Obviously, Benjamin Morrison was trending towards a first-round draft pick. Maybe he wasn't having his best year up to this point. He was coming off shoulder surgery, so he probably wasn't at his best completely. When I say silver lining, Drew, it's really from Notre Dame's perspective. You have a guy like Leonard Moore, a freshman who has really flashed up to this point. And then I would imagine that this means that Benjamin Morrison probably has to come back next year, which wasn't necessarily expected for Notre Dame. Again, silver lining stuff for Notre Dame, not for Ben Morrison, but at least you have a very precocious freshman in Leonard Moore who looks like he's ready to step in and play quality football.
Yeah, and to JB's point, I know he played 76 snaps against Louisville, but it's also, I think, really encouraging just how aggressive and comfortable he kind of seemed in that role, too. It wasn't just he was out there, kind of got through it. Like, he obviously made the key strip. And that forced a fumble, but he just didn't seem afraid and went against maybe some of the best receivers they're going to see all season against Louisville, too.
You know, the other factor, JB, is that Jordan Clark and Rod Hurd II are guys that have some experience there. So you've lost Ben Morrison. Jaden Mickey, you lost some depth there. You have some options if you have to. That's a good thing. But Leonard Moore is going to get the bulk of the reps at cornerback.
Yeah, and we saw that with the way that the coaching staff handled Leonard Moore in the Louisville game, and Drew makes a great point. He wasn't just there treading water. He was there impacting the game. That's really unheard of for a lot of true freshmen, especially. This wasn't an opener against the Sisters of the Poor. This was against a Louisville team that was undefeated at the time, as good a passing attack as the Irish will see all season, and an ACC power conference opponent, and he answered the challenge. They've gotten increased confidence in Hobbs just about week over week. We've been seeing those guys a little bit more in special teams. This does present a little bit of a wrinkle for special teams. Marty Biaggi said last week they were having to pull Junior Tuihalamaka back a little bit from being one of the core four teams guys. And so obviously they'll have to make some adjustments here on teams because Leonard Moore had been a big part of some of the kick coverage units.
Some other injury news. We know that Mitch Jeter left the game after a first quarter kickoff. He is listed as questionable. I would imagine that Zach Yoakum is the guy that steps in there. Marcel Diomede kicked an extra point, but Yoakum's an experienced kicker for Notre Dame. Also still questionable is Billy Schrouth, Notre Dame's right guard that has been out since the Purdue game. Rocco Spindler has been the starter there, and we expect him to start again. And Jordan Faison, you know, we go through this all the time. When there are certain injuries that you see, and then if it's a week later or even 2 weeks later, you know, they're talking about he's ready to go. We didn't really expect Jordan Faison to be ready to go last week. I would imagine this week he should be ready to be back into the rotation.
Yeah, and I think it's important to think with his injury too. He's so predicated on speed that any ankle injury, anything that's going to slow him down, especially a guy at his size too, like is really going to impact his potential effectiveness. And obviously, he already re-aggravated that injury once. You don't want to put him out there in a position where that might happen too. So hopefully you're right that he's finally at a point where his speed is returned and he feels comfortable that that's not going to be something that happens again.
We'll be talking about Georgia Tech a little bit here more in our podcast coming up with Irish Illustrated. But I do want to get into a little bit with Georgia Tech. Haynes King, their quarterback, who's really dynamic. He can really hurt you. He's similar to Riley Leonard. I'd say he's more of a power runner, probably more of an accurate thrower overall, although Leonard's certainly trending in the right direction. But he's banged up. And Marcus Freeman was asked about Haynes King, and Freeman brought up the fact that he missed the time. He missed the last 3 drives of Georgia Tech's win over North Carolina. Zach Pyron is their backup. And again, Marcus Freeman mentioned that they're both very mobile. Pyron is not nearly as established as a passer.
No, and King with Georgia Tech coach Brent Key saying after the game on Saturday that the last second win that they got against a desperate North Carolina team, that Haynes King would require further evaluation. So there was not a lot of clarity there. I believe Coach Key is scheduled to meet with the Atlanta area media today. He usually does 2 to 3 sessions over the course of the week. I'll be curious to see what the updates coming out of Atlanta are on Haynes King, but the fact of the matter is Georgia Tech does not remotely pose the same threat if Haynes King can't go, or if Haynes King is severely limited in his ability to be a dual threat quarterback. That's how he makes the engine run for the Rambling Wreck.
Marcus Freeman was asked about the progress of the Notre Dame offense, and he said it's good for 6 games where they are right now, but it's not good enough for games 7, 8, and 9. We understand where he's coming from. And if Haynes King does play on Saturday and that Georgia Tech offense gets rolling, Notre Dame obviously has a great defense, but that Georgia Tech offense can really roll. Notre Dame needs to pick up where they left off, especially Riley Leonard throwing accurately and confidently last weekend against Stanford.
Yeah, just kind of like Stanford, this is another rush defense that's one of the top in the country. I think they might even rank a little higher than Stanford did in terms of that. So it's really important that Riley Leonard gets going early with the pass game, is accurate, and kind of makes them not be able to key on the run, which could really stymie the offense if that happens.
That's it from outside the Air Parsegan gate here at Notre Dame Stadium. We'll be jumping to Irish Illustrated's podcast here in a moment. This has been Irish Illustrated's Instant Analysis, brought to you by RVMH Hall of Fame in Elkhart, Indiana.